Well, hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Matt Haggman. I'm Miami Program Director at Knight Foundation. And we at Knight Foundation have the great privilege of supporting what promises to be a terrific and very thought-provoking program. One that just from looking out at the crowd, I can tell that this is going to be a very engaging discussion, not just among our panelists up here, but with all of you. And what we're going to do is we are going to watch a short video, and then we will turn to a series of talks by each of our panelists, starting with our guest of honor, Mikael, who's here from Copenhagen. And then we will, each one of our esteemed panelists will give a brief presentation. I'll then begin throwing out some questions, but I'm going to then quickly turn to you. And we'll try to have a really engaging, thoughtful discussion about our community. You know, cities around the world are changing dramatically. We're seeing it here in Miami. And one of the ways, of course, that we're seeing the changes is how we get around. And sort of the bike, something that certainly post-war and post-war America certainly went away, is coming back just as much as cities are becoming more walkable, and all of us are putting much more of a premium on more public spaces as we can increasingly urbanize. Here in Miami, being a city that, you know, arguably 20 years ago, Bernard has certainly a history that I think that I certainly don't have, and certainly that's unique when people live here. But certainly I know from when I moved here 15 years ago to now, you know, a city that I found that even then was sort of so sprawled out and there in so many regards, is now urbanizing in a way that is very, very exciting and presents some unique opportunities. I know it's changing how people live. I think we all see it in our own lives. I see it even in my own office. So one of my colleague who I work with, who's been with me for the last year and a half, he arrived in Miami and he still doesn't own a car. You know, the Miami of 15, 20 years ago, nearly impossible. The Miami of today, that's increasingly common. And sort of this the new Miami that is evolving, having the bike is increasingly a part of that. And I think tonight we can talk about, you know, urban planning and walkability and open spaces and all of that, but certainly with Mikael here talking about the role of the bicycle in driving urban mobility will be sort of the key part of our talk here, as that we've entitled How to Copenhagenize Miami. And so just to give you a quick background on who you have in front of you, Mikael Coilville-Andersen, he's the CEO and founder of Copenhagenize. Mikael arrived here yesterday, and as Bernard's been taking him on a nonstop tour all over Miami. I'm surprised never ends. And in fact, you know, there's more this evening, and then he actually has to be giving a talk, I think at 8:15 tomorrow morning. So
no, I don't know.
Oh, 8. Okay. Well, you can sleep in. So no, he can't sleep in. No, sorry, I tried. As an urban design expert and CEO of Copenhagenize Design Company, Mikael Coilville-Andersen is one of the leading global voices in urban planning, and he focuses on establishing the bicycle on the urban landscape. Mikael regards the bicycle as the most important tool in our urban toolbox for rebuilding our livable cities, and we look forward to hearing more about how you're doing that around the world, but in particular how we can do that here in Miami. To Michael's left, Jim Wolfe. He is the District 6 Secretary for the Florida Department of Transportation. Jim was appointed District 6 Secretary of FDOT in May of 2016. As District Secretary, he is responsible for the overall planning, design, construction, maintenance, and operation of the state highway system in Miami-Dade and Monroe counties, and has some very, very, very important projects underway right now, which we certainly look forward to hearing more about. To Jim's left, Aileen Boucle. Aileen is the Executive Director for the Miami-Dade Metropolitan Planning Organization. Aileen is currently leading the charge along with the MPO Governing Board to provide mobility choices for residents of Miami-Dade County through the local transportation planning process. But more specifically, and this is something all of us, I think, it's important to engage in, is that leading the charge with the Strategic Miami Area Rapid Transit Plan, better known as the SMART Plan. I think when we walked in, you saw the map of what is being proposed. It certainly envisions a dramatically different Miami as it relates to public transit. And last, but certainly not least, the person who put this all together, and we have to thank for this terrific program tonight, and that's Bernard Zyscovich. Bernard hardly needs any introduction here. Bernard studied urban design and architecture at the University of do you speak Italian? Si. Yeah. So he studied at the University of Architecture in Venice before moving to New York's Pratt Institute, where he received his Bachelor of Architecture degree. He founded his urban planning, architecture, and urban design firm, Zyscovich Architects, in 1977. So celebrating a birthday. Yes. That's actually a very important birthday this year. And quickly became an integral part of the South Florida community. And as we all drive around South Florida and Miami, Bernard's imprint is impossible to miss and continues to make just such an important and lasting imprint in our community. So with that, going to turn to some presentations. Michael will kick us off. Michael will talk 12 to 15 minutes, thereabouts, and then we'll turn to some 8-minute talks. We actually have, I think we have someone who's keeping time up here, just so we keep it moving, and then we'll turn to questions. Right back here with Grace. And then I'll throw out some questions, but I really want you, as these talks are going on, to be thinking of things you want to ask, because I'll quickly turn to you and we can have a really engaging discussion. But actually, before your talk, Michael, we're going to watch a video. And do you want to tee it off, yes, Bernard?
Let me tee it off. If we start it, that'll be great. This is hot off the press. We just got it this afternoon when it was finally finished animating. So for those of you who don't know, the reason that these events are happening is tomorrow evening we have the opening of the Plan Z exhibit in Coral Gables Museum. So we were invited by the museum to create an exhibition. And we have a lot of still images, but we went ahead and through the good graces of Pita, who is an animation company that we work with, they went ahead and created this video to make it really clear what our intention is. So as you see this, it's going to be a very quick 4-minute ride out the quay and back. And if we could only ride that quickly, we would all be champions. But the point is that in the yellow is a 6-foot wide running path and pedestrian path so that it's next to the water. We have a bi-directional bicycle path. The intention is to completely separate the bicycles from the cars. And while we're doing it, since we're creative architects, we went ahead and included some observation platforms and some cool little landscape ideas. But the point being that in the past 5 years, 4 people have been killed out on the road, and the motivation started with safety, but as I'll present later on, it extends well beyond safety. So as you come up, you see that the bike path actually moves up and down, because in order to have complete separation, we need to allow the bike path to allow the cars to come underneath. This is an image of a 20-acre reclaimed land that's currently right-of-way that we're proposing to make into a park that the county would control. And then we have, you will note, all the same number of lanes that currently exist today. We're not taking away any driving lanes. And in fact, once we separate the bikes altogether, we actually don't even care how fast the cars go, because now we have our own space and we're not feeling in danger. The other thing is that the county is committed to replacing the Bearcut Bridge, and we went ahead and included the Bearcut Bridge replacement through the generous design efforts of our newly found darling Linda Figg, who has given us tremendous engineering input into how we could replace the bridge, make it hurricane-proof. So that is really the big idea. You'll see as you get here to Arthur Lamb Road, which is the name of the road that goes out to the quay, how the bicycle, which is eastbound, actually has another bicycle bridge that takes you across right here and then merges you into the bi-directional lane. So the idea is that this will be a 20-mile loop that will be the envy of the country, I think. We're generating a tremendous amount of additional benefits, including sea level rise, which is the intention of moving the roadway. So as we move the roadway out of the way in order to generate the space for the park, we raise it 2.5 feet, and we overcome the fact that Rickenbacker Causeway is actually the most vulnerable county-owned causeway in the county, and it will be underwater when sea level comes back into play. And as we head out to the mainland, we will have a bridge connection right here to the lower left. We intend to keep the bikes up over US 1, over the I-95 ramp, and we will connect with Meg's wonderful project at the Underline so that you'll be able to go directly from the Underline out to the quay without having to be on the street and taking your life in your hands.
That's extraordinary, Bernard. By the way, when you'll be biking, will you hear the music too? Is that music part of the there's an app for that. Right, there is. There's an app for that. It's extraordinary. Extraordinary. I'm going to turn it over to Michael. One piece of context I think it's fun is that as, Michael comes to this from the perspective of Copenhagen, and Aileen and Jim were just in Copenhagen last fall. So all of the stuff that Michael is going to talk about are things that Aileen and Jim actually had the opportunity to experience firsthand, which I think will be really neat to inform our discussion. Of course, Bernard has spent lots of time there. So with that, we'll turn it over to Michael.
Thank you very much. There's one absolute truth, and that it is just really great to be in Miami. I've never been here before, so we all kind of know Miami before we ever get here, and it's just like I imagined. It's awesome. It's super cool, man. I'm sorry I missed you two in Copenhagen. I was traveling, so I didn't get to meet up with you. I drank wine with you last year, and you told me about some weird project about this, and then I was amazed at how bold it was, and then we communicated further, and I mean, it is a project that is so completely in your face regarding architectural urbanism, regarding transforming Miami positively, that you can't not love this, and it serves an important purpose, as Bernard said. What I primarily focus on is the bicyclist transport, and we work around the world with cities and governments as our clients, and we're not worried about the future of our jobs, because this really is a thing. Some of the cities we're working with at the moment include Paris, Strasbourg in France, Amsterdam, but also most importantly for you guys is we're working with Detroit and the city of Long Beach. These are our two biggest clients. These are two cities that just went, yeah, right, we're all in. We got to go for this now. It's time for change. It's time to modernize the transport in our cities. Detroit, of course, is a blank canvas. You're not allowed to say that when you're in Detroit. They all said, "Can you stop saying blank canvas, please? We're still 700,000 people living here, okay? We're not your painting canvas. We're living here." So we're designing their entire bicycle infrastructure network for the next 100 years of transport in Detroit. And Long Beach, this is, I see a lot of similarities staying out at the beach and driving around Miami with Long Beach. They just kind of went, yep, they drink the Kool-Aid and they get it, and they're transforming the city of Long Beach, modernizing their transport, taking the bicycle seriously as transport. This is what it looks like in Copenhagen. That's like noon on some random day in May. This is what it looked like a couple weeks ago, below zero, and you still have 75% of the population riding bikes. I want to establish a baseline. What a lot of this facility, Plan Z, is focused on a lot of the recreational cyclists going out for an amazing, healthy ride. And it does have some important transport functions as well. Hopefully it will influence the city of Miami and Miami-Dade County to push it even further, to really take back some space for transport cycling. But my focus is simply cities and getting people around. And I often hear around the world, oh, Copenhagen, that's so nice. You people are so cute riding your bicycles. That's what you do. That's your culture. But I really try to boil it all down to its simplest form. And cities, what is a city? It's just an urban space populated by Homo sapiens who have to go from A to B to C, right? There are unique things about Miami and Copenhagen and Melbourne and Sydney or whatever, but really it's just an urban space where people have to move around constantly. And when you do that, then you see a lot of similarities between the typologies of our cities. We've had cities for about 7,000 years. This is one of our core philosophies. And for 7,000 years, if you consider it, the streets of our cities were the most democratic spaces in the history of humankind. We did everything in the streets. They were extensions of our homes. We transported ourselves. Our kids played there. We flirted. We found our partners. We did everything. And it was really an amazing democratic process for 7,000 years. The invention of the automobile transformed society in many ways positively. I would say it transformed cities rather negatively. And it really has turned since the 1950s and the urban planning traditions that came out of this country and went all around the world. We really have seen much less democracy on the urban space and especially on the streets. I'm going to hop through, because I was told I had 12 minutes, right? Yeah, God, you don't know me, do you? So the streets for me are beautiful. I mean, they are the skeletal structure of the city organism, the veins that pump the lifeblood of a city out to its furthest reaches. What we're seeing now around the world is that we're moving, back in the 40s with urban planning and putting all of our money on the car, we're seeing that we're moving towards a different paradigm shift all over the world. This is not just some dude from Copenhagen with a wacky theory. This is something that is happening. And this is my favorite quote about cities, right? Not society in general, but as cities. The fact is that the automobile no longer has a place in the big cities of our time. Some of you people might be freaking out about that quote right now here in America, but I wish this was my quote, but it's actually the mayor of Paris for 12 years until 2014. The lady now in charge of Paris is just continuing the work. This guy, he just sees cities as something that can be better, something that can be improved. He's not alone. He's not some lone wolf politician saying some weird stuff. Bloomberg in New York said the same thing. Mayors around the world are talking this talk now. And when people like that say things like this, we realize that we are moving towards a paradigm shift. And I think modern cities are the ones that are ahead of the curve and are ready for the transformational effect. Yeah, it's not recreational cycling. It's about the people of a city who can move around the city to go to work, to go to school. You can drive on your commute and come home and then you forget your milk. And your default is, I'll just take the bike down to the shops, go to the cinema, go to a restaurant. Having the bicycle as an integral, inseparable part of the transport equation, as it is in Copenhagen and many cities in Europe. It's about, like I say, the 99%. Not just the people going out on a ride on a Sunday, which is amazing, but this is about city transport. It's not about who's cycling now, it's about who could be cycling. And there's a lot of people who estimate how many people would ride a bike. There's some interesting studies out of Portland. But a good baseline for any city, a good goal to shoot for is 20% of the population riding bikes for transport. One of the things that is different here than in Europe is often in traffic engineering and planning, bicycles are put into the same sort of species category as cars. They got wheels, they must be together. And pedestrians are those people over there. In Europe, it's much different. Bicycles are simply fast-moving pedestrians. We put them together in a group. We think about them as one unit, as it were. And automobiles are separated in our mentality. So that offers up a different way of planning cities. A short history of traffic engineering. For 7,000 years, we were pretty rational about the way we move people. We provided a fast A to B for our primary transport forms, like walking and horses, I guess, for that long. 1900s came along, and the bicycle just transformed human society and transport in our cities immensely. And we were still pretty rational in the second slide. 1920s came along. We're still pretty rational. Cars had appeared, but really from 1950s and onwards, around the world, we adopted the transport planning that really prioritized the automobile and nothing else. We forgot everything else we had invented, and we just simply put all of our money on one horse. And you can see the result. Fast A to B to cars in a city like Miami, but it's at the expense of everybody else for decades now. And that's what we're trying to change. This is, for fun, but this is the quickest traffic planning guide you'll ever see. You prioritize the 3 transport forms on the left, and you make driving a car more difficult, more expensive, more inaccessible, reduced travel times. All the campaigns in the world for ride a bike, man, it's good for you, save a polar bear on your bicycle today, all that, all of that rhetoric, it doesn't mean anything unless we're doing the fourth line and saving lives in the process. We know this in Copenhagen. I call it A to B-ism, right? That's all we want. Everybody in this room, everybody in human history, we just want to go quick from A to B. If you make that the bicycle in the city, if you make it a competitive transport form, half your battle is won. We know this in Copenhagen because we ask people every 2 years since 1996, hey, what's your main reason for riding a bike? And it never changes. The majority says, dude, it's just quick. It's like everything's 20, 30 minutes away in the city center. Some people say, I get my exercise, not the fitness crowd, but just sort of riding my bike, a few kilometers, a couple miles to work. I feel good about myself. I get that 30 minutes a day that they keep telling me about. 6% ride because it's cheap, and only 1% ride to save that polar bear, for environmental reasons. So really, it is simply taking the bicycle seriously as transport. And like I said, 75% continue to ride all through the winter. We're seeing all over the world that we're having to change some questions. We're looking at our cities more differently now than we have in 100 years. And, the question that we've asked our traffic engineers for almost a century is just one question. How many cars can we fit down this street right here? How can we squeeze more down this street, There's been no other question. And all my traffic engineering colleagues, they confirm this. Yet nobody's asked me anything different, dude. It's just like, that's it. Modern cities are changing the question. With urbanization like we've never had it before, we're now asking, how many people can we move down a street? We were stuck in traffic coming over here from the beach. I mean, it's insane, right? How many people could we move using all the forms of transport, all this cool stuff we've invented, buses and trams and bikes? The capacity of this model on the right is 10 times that of the model on the left that we just kind of inherited from the 1950s and didn't really question. So we're thinking differently. We're changing questions. One of the low-hanging fruits in North America is your car lane widths. There's a big movement in Europe to narrow in the car lanes to something that makes it safer. If motorists have to concentrate, generally that's good for everybody. It's good for them and their safety. It's good for everybody in the city. So, we're not really reducing, travel times. We're just simply narrowing in the car lanes. And you guys have car lanes that are wider than some European countries, okay? It's like you have an entire Slovenia that you're driving down. It's just insane. And so there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. If you actually adopted this international standard that is really taking over, narrow in the car lanes, you actually have enough space. As you can see, this is in Calgary in Canada. I sort of did the rough Photoshop math there. You narrow in the car lanes, and you have enough space for best practice cycle track off to the side. But then you see weird stuff appearing, like traffic engineers who were told top down to go make some space for bikes, and they're going, oh God, bikes, right? I don't ride a bike. I'm never going to ride one, but I'll take my measuring tape out and find some space. They're ignoring a lot of space off to the left here, making some weird infrastructure with bollards. Like nobody. That's only in one city in the world, and there's a reason you'll never see that anywhere else. It's because it's stupid. So sorry about the stupid thing, but in North America, what we don't understand is how you put the bike lanes on the wrong side of parked cars. Like if I suggested this to a Danish city, they'd laugh at me thinking I was joking. If I was serious, I'd just be fired, basically. You put cyclists in between the door zone of a single occupant car society where 80% are getting out on the left side of the car, in between that and moving traffic. It's the greatest way to protect the paint job on parked cars. Just put some squishy cyclists in between it, right? But it's not best practice at all. And sharrows, I've in some American cities I've been in, we got 400 miles of bicycle infrastructure, Michael. I'm going, no, you don't. You got 100 pictograms in the middle of a car lane, all right? And there's a study out of the University of Colorado just last year that basically concluded that, you know what, sharrows don't work. They don't encourage cycling. They don't keep cyclists safe. It's kind of like, it's done now. We're done with sharrows. They have had no effect. I'm skipping over the whole design spiel here. I like to do the math. We're in Scandinavia, we're very pragmatic. We like to measure everything. We just measure absolutely anything we can because we want to know why we're doing stuff. We're building bike lanes, man. We're going to save the planet. No, we want to know why we're doing it, and we want to know if it's going to pay off, if we're actually using our money effectively. So the greatest thing about everything I'm saying here is that it's all been invented. Like, I'm actually not saying anything new. Generations of planners and engineers from all over the world have figured this stuff out before us. We don't have to reinvent the wheel because it's round and it's already rolling. About infrastructure for bikes, we have 100 years of best practice. In 1915 in Copenhagen, they basically put the first separated, protected bike lane, you guys call it, separated physically from the car traffic and from the pedestrians. 1915. All we've done for 100 years is test it with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of cyclists. We kind of know that it works rather well. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. The best cycle track width for capacity, how to hook it up with intermodality, with buses and trains. Everything's been figured out. There's so much money to be saved if you just copy. It's Control-C, Control-V, right? You just copy-paste this into any city on the planet. You're saving money and you're getting better results. We like to do the math. We know that this is a best practice cycle track. One way on one side of the street, minimum 2.3 meters, right? We know that we can move 5,900 people per hour on that cycle track. A car lane, when it's flowing smoothly, not congested, it can only move 1,300 people because there's one person in every car, right? So with 1,300 people every hour. And then there's buses and trams, which, 50,000 a day or whatever you can get up to with those. So we just simply have done the math and we put our money on the most effective transport forms in our city. Some of you might think Copenhagen, cute little European capital from, the 12th century. That's so nice. Oh, my God. But Copenhagen actually has the third largest urban sprawl in Europe. When you go there, you go to the city center, and that's where you want to go. You don't want to go to the suburbs. I don't want to go to the suburbs here. It's just not a tourist destination for anybody. But we do have this sprawl. We have a lot of train lines and whatnot. But really, it is a way of moving 2 million people in Copenhagen all over the urban center. Usually to Copenhagen and back home again. But it's not just this cute little European city with cobblestones and baguettes sticking out of our bike baskets, okay? It's a big European city, and we need to move a lot of people. This is how we move people in the city of Copenhagen proper. 56% ride a bike. This is no left-wing, tree-hugging, pinko commie Scandinavian way to move around. Okay, this is just transport, right? This is like, I often look, with the way you guys work it here with politics, I often think the bicycle is the ultimate Republican, chariot of freedom. It's independent mobility. Nobody tells me where to go and when to go and to get some exercise. I can do it myself. I run my own show on a bike. Only 14%, it's one of the richest cities on the planet, but only 14% drive a car. We simply have the other options available, and people want to go fast from A to B, and they know how to do that. Oh, here's the numbers. This is why we do it. We don't want to throw money at something that we're never going to see again. Every time we build 1 kilometer of separated cycle track, we get the money back in under 5 years. It's simply cost efficient, and it's a way of recouping your costs in a very short time. The health benefits, reduce congestion for cars. We've measured the hell out of this thing. Every time I ride a bicycle 1 kilometer, we earn 24 cents as a city. Every time somebody drives a car 1 kilometer, we pay out 91 cents. If you're some Richard Branson and you're going to buy a city and you're going to figure out how to run that city effectively as a business, you know where you're going to put your money. You're going to start maybe reducing the number of automobiles in the city, putting in public transport, and putting your money on bikes. This is why we do it. $250 million a year. All the people like me. I often add when I'm in North America that I'm not a cyclist. I can't repair a bike. My bike is from 1955. It has one gear. I'm not a cyclist. I own no spandex or anything at all. None of the people who work for me are cyclists. We're just regular people who happen to get around our city by bike. So that's an important thing. But just people like me riding bikes every day, $250 million in public health savings for the city. The city's invested, $153 million in bicycle infrastructure, bridges and widening cycle tracks. I'm really bad at math, but that kind of makes sense, right? $153 million in 10 years, but we make, $250 million a year. That seems to make good business sense for me. The health benefits of cycling are 20 times greater than any risk. This is one of my kids here. We know that the health benefits are so massive that it's worth putting our money into this. There's a lot of things about, we measure travel times, time lost in traffic, and on bicycles you're going faster through the urban core. So we're saving man hours. We have a more productive workforce. All of these factors come into play. I'm jumping here now. Hang on. There it is. So we measure 120 cities every 2 years with the Copenhagenize index. Nobody had a bicycle cities ranking, so we made one in 2011 because nobody else bothered, so we did it. And now it just blows up on our face every 2 years. Everybody wants to know where they're positioned. I can't remember where Miami is, but you're not in the top 20. I can tell you that right now. No disrespect, but what's interesting is all Copenhagen, Amsterdam, blah blah blah, bicycle cities. That's fine. It's not about us anymore. You come there and you learn. Like Nice City brings people over. And it's an amazing experience. And you see a lot of results when they come home. But it's all about the cities, the zeros to heroes. Seville in Spain, Sevilla, they went from 0.2% of the population riding bikes to 7% in only 4 years. Buenos Aires is the new poster child. 90 miles of bicycle infrastructure, separated infrastructure in a network, fell out of a sky in these two cities. And they, in only 2 years in Buenos Aires, there's like streets in Buenos Aires where 3 years ago there's one guy named Juan riding a bike, and now there's 5,000 people a day transporting themselves to work in the Argentinian capital. Paris, there was no bikes in Paris, just left in Paris 10 years ago. Barcelona, Budapest, these are cities that are just rocking it. So, you don't have to chase Copenhagen or Amsterdam. You got to start worrying about Detroit, Long Beach, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, San Francisco, Minneapolis. Minneapolis is number 18 in the world. The mayor there is just rocking it. They are building the infrastructure and the facilities. So if you're all, Copenhagen, that's over there. You know what? You got people breathing down your neck in your own hood, right? And this is really, it's a game. This is what's happening. This is the new normal, and it's just rocking all over the world. It's not going anywhere. So I would love nothing more than to see Miami getting the game face on, showing the rest of the country what is possible in a short amount of time, benefiting the population, the citizens, reducing congestion, all the amazing things you can do with the bicycle as transport. And that's up to you guys, not me. But thank you.
Michael, thank you. And we come back to you. Please tell us what you really think.
Okay.
That's terrific. Jim.
Well, I'm going to slow it down a little bit here, and I'm in my native language. Yeah, and I only get 8 minutes, and I'll stick to the 8 minutes. No, I would have given you my time. That was great. We got to go to, Aileen and I, we got to go to Copenhagen, courtesy of our sponsors, the Knight Foundation, and 880 Cities, and they had a purpose. They wanted to inoculate us with some ideas about, we thought we were going to look at bicycles, but it was primarily about revitalizing urban spaces, bringing some life to the city, and bicycles is just a means to do that. But we still looked at the bicycles. It wasn't all work. But these should be exciting times for people on bicycles in Miami. And you heard Matt's introduction. I mostly work on roads. Our biggest project this year is the Signature Bridge, rebuild 395, $800 million. But I'm here tonight, and at 8 a.m. tomorrow, you wanted to know where we were at 8 a.m. tomorrow, I'll be at the mayor's press conference for Ride a Bike to Work Week. And Saturday morning, I'll be with Meg Daly and Aileen, and we're going to be bicycle riding, right, on the Impact. The bicycles seem to interact with what I do as a traffic engineer more than they have in the past, and there's a real opportunity for us here. You already heard from Michael. My numbers are different. They're still impressive. As far as how many people are in cars, 29%.
Why that's different?
Sure.
Just like really quick.
I understand why it's different, but you go ahead.
Okay. No. We measure the who has an address in Copenhagen. That's the 56%. This is how people from all of the surrounding municipalities, there's like 21 municipalities, this is how they arrive in the city of Copenhagen for work or education. There's the two ways of measuring it, but they're both awesome.
Yeah, there you go. That's a bridge that Aileen and I visited, but not in that time period. And I pulled that off the internet to show what it used to look like, because we went to that bridge, and same picture you had. So you had that picture. But that's the same bridge, and it's lots of traffic, and you think, well, it was easy for Copenhagen. It's always been that way, but it wasn't always that way. This is after World War II, probably the 60s, and this is a very unpleasant environment for bicycles. There are no bicycle lanes. There's no striping of any kind. The vehicles have taken over the road. Pre-war, people didn't have cars. Probably during the war, they didn't have cars. And then this happened and probably drove the bicycles off the streets. So Copenhagen had to deliberately create the right environment for them to come back. Here we've got a public square in the post-war period. It should be cobblestones under there somewhere. This is the same square. Notice the fountain? Same square today. They got rid of the cars. Sometime around 1990 or a little after that, they made a deliberate effort to change the environment. They said, this isn't where we want to be. Here's probably a typical plaza in 1890. There aren't any bicycles, but there aren't any cars either, and there's mixed use going on here. This is Israel's Platz from post-war period. It's a big parking lot. This is the same plaza we were just looking at, and it's full of mixed use. There's drainage, a skateboard. This is a playground for the school that's here. There's underground parking. This is a farmer's market over here. A lot of different mixed use going on here, more effective use of the public space. And something I wanted to point out was down here at the bottom, you can see inside the houses, they have interior courtyards. This is looking down from Gale Architects in Copenhagen, but this is just typical of what an interior courtyard looks like. They've got the utilities, the trash, and the bicycle parking tucked away inside the building rather than on the street. This was interesting. Malmö, Sweden. It's probably a half-hour train ride from Copenhagen, and a lot of Swedes work there. They ride their bike. There's over 2,000 bicycle parking spaces here at the Malmö train station. They go into Sweden, into Copenhagen. This is a station in Copenhagen, train station. And what's interesting to me is that I did take this picture. This is a rainy Sunday morning. So what are the bikes doing here? They probably live here. People in the suburbs or in Malmö somewhere leave their bikes here all the time so that they can come into town, grab their bike, and go somewhere. And this is a great example of mixed use and making the two modes work together. Here's a good example of the bicycle lane itself. It's got perhaps a 3-inch partially raised gutter there. I felt very safe riding on this. The path is about 10 feet wide. This is that same bridge we showed a couple of pictures on earlier, and it has about 20 feet of pavement for bicycles, about 20 feet of pavement for the bikes, and about 20 feet of pavement for the pedestrians. And I understand that the average daily traffic for bicycles here is 30 to 35,000, and that's probably comparable to what you can get on the vehicle lanes. A lot of features here. This is a bicycle signal. Another bicycle lane. A lot of things here. Bicycle signal, no right turn on red, blue emphasis marking in the intersection. This is wrong. They only do the blue on 2 quadrants, not 4, to make it emphasis. A lot of things we could learn there. But this is a point that I thought was very interesting. You got very good marking here. What's unusual here is that this isn't a street. This is in a park. It's a playground, and we saw grandmothers, it looked like, with toddlers out there learning proper driver and bicycle safety. And these signals all work. The kids stop. We found that people all over Copenhagen were obeying the traffic rules. The pedestrians, the motorists, the bicyclists, they were following the rules, and that was just phenomenal. I wish we could get more of that here. So, some of the key points here on bicycle design. That's it.
Awesome. Aileen.
Thank you. So I wanted to kind of add to Jim's presentation since we went on the trip together, and I've been with him on several panels talking about our immersion and our experience in Copenhagen. So I thought what I'd share with you are really my top 3 observations from the outside looking in on my 1-week immersion in Copenhagen, coming from not just a professional perspective of being a transportation planner, but also my confession, which I made live tonight on Facebook with Amy, when I was notified that our team won the competition to go to Copenhagen. That is when I turned around and told my husband, we need to buy bicycles so that we can start riding bikes so that I can be ready for this. I did not own a bicycle. I'm confessing, and and my husband, who's here, also traveled on with me to this, and we bought bicycles, and we practiced, and we immersed ourselves, and so you're really going to get a good top 3 observational perspective from me. So I want to talk to you about public trust and how I saw the culture and how that relates to the urban planning experience. The dynamic planning process, which is an area of interest for me. I'm going to share my perspective of that. And of course, the educational reinforcement that really keeps it going from generation to generation. So public trust. Public trust is critical because I think that when you have public trust, you have an acceptance of shared facilities, shared infrastructure. The support for projects are there. People generally are favorable and want to participate in the development of the projects. Public participation is high. Public participation in the public realm is high. You have innovative and supportive funding structures in place and funding policies to put these kind of projects in place. And then last but not least, what Jim mentioned, compliance. Now, as an outsider on an immersion in this culture, I can share my first 60 seconds on the bicycle. I was actually terrified, thinking that the car behind me was going to run me over, and the car refused to pass me. He was traveling at 0.5 miles as I struggled on my bicycle, looking more behind me, until I realized that he was going to give me the right-of-way. I also experienced that every time I came to a driveway opening on the bike lane, and I would stop for the car, and the car refused to move because I had the right-of-way. There is compliance, but I wanted to share this picture with you, which is fascinating. This is a baby in a baby stroller outside on the sidewalk outside a restaurant in Copenhagen. And so this really is the cornerstone of public trust, right? So back in the 1990s in New York City, you may have seen in national news that a Danish couple left their baby, their infant, outside a restaurant in the Upper East Side, New York, and the patrons called the police. People on the sidewalk were alarmed. The police came. The child was taken into foster care. The parents were arrested. The judge issued supervised visits in order for the mother to be reunited with her child, and there was really a culture shock. But really, in Copenhagen, leaving children outside is a public acceptance, public trust, and that's really shows you how they're operating as a society, and how does that relate to their overall culture and how they move and how they can facilitate this type of process. Just like, pictures. These are pictures we took. You can see young children on bicycles, mothers with children on bikes, people of all ages, up to the 880s concept. If you build infrastructure for 8 and 80-year-olds, you pretty much cover the wide span of your residents and your needs. The type of infrastructure that's out there with the dedicated bike lanes, the pedestrian, bicyclist cars, they follow the rules. The expectation is there. The trust is there. You have a vibrant pedestrian life. I like this picture in the bottom of the bus. It says American Spirit. Just wanted to show that today. But some of the places we went to are restaurants. There was a lot of Americana symbolism there. So I just thought it was interesting how they embrace us. But this other picture to your left of the bus is showing the bicyclists stopping to give the right of way to the pedestrians that are getting off the bus. So there's a very there is an order in place where pedestrians come first, people first, pedestrians, bicyclists, then vehicles. That's how come you see all these bicycles out there. People getting around. There's an expectation that they're going to arrive safely. There's an expectation people are going to comply with the rules of the law of the road. There's an expectation your bicycle will be there when you get back. And, people stay on their crosswalk, bicyclists stay on their lane, and the cars yield. So dynamic planning process, this is the fun part for me. What do I mean by dynamic planning process? I like to say that it's the opposite of what a fixed master plan would be. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater was something we heard when we were there. Copenhagen has a lot of history, historical structures. They can't just go and redesign. They have to really embrace the old and innovate on how they're going to bring the new. Unique needs and solutions, keeping the focus that every single area, every single project has its own challenges and its own solutions. I like to point out to the desire line concept that's embraced by Copenhagen, which we want to look at here, where their approach to engineering the infrastructure is really looking at the desire of the movement through that area, through the intersection, through the larger area. You kind of can see that here on some bike paths that you might see graveled road, and you kind of see that that's the desire line or the path that people are taking as opposed to the infrastructure, the way that it was designed. So sometimes the way we design things may not be 100% compatible with the desire of the movement through the intersection. I think Copenhagen's done a great job advancing that type of concept. And of course, a people-first philosophy. Oh, I do want to note that this was Copenhagen's vision for green and blue and how they were going to transform their landscape in terms of parks and greens and waterways, and just the picture of 2008 versus 2015 and the type of projects they undertook to increase the amount of public space in terms of green and blue. Dynamic planning process, again, be innovative. Jim didn't know that I was going to show this picture, but there's Jim, Secretary Wolfe, right there on a bicycle. But that bicycle has a GPS system on it. And so talk about innovation. That really captured our interest when we saw that. So I don't know if I shared this picture with you before, Jim, but there you go.
Not to show any without a helmet.
All right. Yeah. Yes, Jim and I traveled to Copenhagen with our helmets, and we wore it at all times, but for the exception of this one picture, he really did wear it, promoting safety. Working across traditional lines was something that I noticed in Copenhagen with the different groups you worked with. And what I mean by that is it's not just multidisciplinary, but multi-jurisdictional. It's not just the city, it's not just the agencies. They bring everyone to the table with a people first and user needs concept first and the desire line. And also pilot projects, that's our terminology here, a way of saying that Copenhagen's really good about facilitating, setting up temporary concepts as an effective way to move them forward, what we call our pilot projects. This diagram in the bottom is a park in Copenhagen. If I can remember, I think I have in my notes the name of the park here. It's Harbor Park. Very interesting because they call it, instead of a public space, they call it a public square, and it has different expressions of public space to attract a wide range of ages to the public square, cultures and activities. So we saw a lot of innovative urban planning while we were there as well. It wasn't just all bicycles. I like this slide, which we took from one of our PowerPoint presentations, because the Danish really know the answer to this question, which is, what will it take for you to walk? What are the features that you need to have in the public realm to walk, to facilitate that? More, and you can read there, more green paths and trails, cleaner city, improved air quality, less car traffic. And between 2010 and 2015, they were able to address those issues specifically. They increased close to 20%. And just to wrap it up, just some pictures. We saw Malmo, Sweden, the way that this project was designed for the use intended. Educational reinforcement was critical. You saw Jim's slide in terms of the park that's there. I'm happy to say that Miami-Dade County Parks and the Transportation Planning Organization are meeting to see how we can incorporate this concept. We want to see how we can have this type of design in our parks for our children to start experiencing and learning what it's like to bike. But here's the ultimate goal of educational reinforcement. There's no confusion. There's no hesitation. People know where they walk. Bicyclists know where they ride, and cars know where they are. So there's a lot of benefit for that. My time's up, so we'll keep going here, but thank you.
Bernard.
Well, I've learned a lot today, actually. because I realized that this notion of Rickenbacker Park as opposed to the Causeway and the Ludlam Trail and the Underline, it's really more of a defensive gesture than a proponent gesture. Because unfortunately in Miami, and what I've learned from Michael hanging out with him these couple days, is that his whole influence is really related to how you start a bicycle system from within in the urban core. And I realized that we in Miami, unfortunately, don't really have the confidence to ride in our urban core. And maybe this is the paradigm of this type of city, which is that we need to begin to think about how we take those who were already riding and make it safer and make it more viable and use that as a catalyst to then have a situation where if we have thousands of people which already are riding out on the Causeway, out and eventually on the Underline and others, we will then have a very strong demand structure for the government to help us create urban streets that allow us to get to those facilities. So I think that we really need to do this in one very big, bold gesture. That's what I've learned from Michael. And I've also observed that in my now 40 years of doing this, which is that small incremental steps don't really necessarily work out so well. It's really hard to make a big change in lots of little tiny steps. So this is a project that really is derivative of a response to fatalities. But I've learned as I've been working on the project that it's much more than that. It's really an opportunity to transform public infrastructure as we know it here in the country, which is basically right-of-way and roadways, into open space, into parkland, and into solving a lot of other issues. So the Rickenbacker Causeway, from an FDOT perspective, to my knowledge, has the same classification as US 1. That's where I started this whole study 4 years ago. Because I was thinking, if I'm on a bike and we're only going out to the village of Key Biscayne, why does it have the same classification of the federal highway that goes all the way up the east coast of the country? And what became very clear is what it's really turned into, as opposed to what it started with, was a recreational corridor where you can run, you can ride, you can see moms with strollers, you can go sailboarding, you can do all kinds of other things. So I wanted to outline for you the purpose of this project. One is safety and connectivity. I think that's pretty self-evident. And the connectivity issue cannot be overstated because to get here on a bike is a kind of scary proposition. Once you're on the Rickenbacker, it's cool, although it's also not so cool. But to get here is really difficult. You've got to cross US 1, you've got to go past the I-95 exit ramp. All of the street infrastructure has right turn on reds that are emphasized by curving free flows. If you're on the bike and you're clipped in, it's a scary proposition. The other thing is sea level rise on the Causeway, because to get to the village of Key Biscayne is easy right now. But if you've seen what's going on Miami Beach, the county just came out with a report that this is the most vulnerable corridor in the county, and there will be disconnection. Hurricane hardening. The Bear Cut Bridge is not really able to withstand anything Category 3 and above. It will actually wash out. So the bridge repair above the ground is fine, but the foundations are not. And in a tidal surge and in heavy winds, the bridge will literally just leave its foundation. We have an opportunity when we think about infrastructure as open space to begin to carve out where we could have new park systems and new recreational areas, and it's really absolutely beautiful along the south edge of the Causeway because you look out over the entire bay and it's an opportunity to create something quite magnificent. We don't know that bicycle tourism is a thing, as Michael says, but believe me, bicycle tourism is a thing. We're a tourist environment, and there are many people that go in many different parts of the world just for the purpose of being able to be out on the bike and rent the hotel rooms. And so there's a commercial reason to come here. This is one of the best rides anywhere. The new infrastructure is a really important part because when you look at the overall Rickenbacker corridor, it's really filled in many ways with obsolete and underperforming infrastructure. And because we're in the design business, we wanted to make sure it's beautiful. So we believe it is. You can be the judge of that. What started this was this issue of fatalities. The Florida death rate for cyclists is 3 times the national average. We have one of the worst cities. I think we're in the negative rankings of your Copenhagenize rankings. And I think it's really time that we begin to look at that. This is a graph that indicates the U.S. Right here in terms of the number of people walking as a percentage. The orange is cycling. And here we have Denmark and the Netherlands and Germany. And this is actually by age group. The other side shows you the fatalities as 1,000 kilometers. The Netherlands, Denmark, Germany, UK, they're very, very low. The US, which has the least amount of bicycle and pedestrian traffic, has literally fatalities that are off the chart compared to the rest of the world. It's a very, very scary graph, and it's kind of an unbelievable thing. So when you begin to look at all of the public space that's out here, once you get past the toll plaza, our plan proposes to increase it by 20 acres, but when you look at all of the open space and parkland that's out here, it's really amazing. There's 2,000 acres when you add up all the parks, all of the facilities. We have an unbelievable asset that we don't really recognize as an asset, and what I'm calling Plan Z is really the spine that connects everything to everything else. So it's no wonder that it's the most popular ride in the entire state. The Miami Loop is a project that we're looking at, and I realize graphically that what we're fascinated with here is the surroundings. We haven't really dared to get into the center of the city, and I think that it's really important, and that's actually the reason that I invited Mikael to help launch the exhibition, is that I really wanted his viewpoint to emanate out of these conversations so that we can really begin to understand that we're not inventing the wheel, that if we can embrace some of these basic concepts, we could then have all of our representatives perhaps move forward with this. So I've already shown you the animation, but basically this is the overview. There's a new entry point. There's a new connection back here to the underline. We have protected, separated bike paths. Everywhere that we cross, we have grade separation. We have a brand new park that we're proposing to include along the south edge of the bay. And here you see one of the images. Imagine entering the quay this way instead of the way it is today. It would really be a beautiful thing. The transponders can happen underneath the bridge. When you begin to look at it heading toward the city, this is the separated lane that parallels the ramp and then loops back down and connects into the underline. So the underline connects all of the most dense parts of the city, and then this would be an extension of that that takes you out to the quay. So we believe very strongly that this is a great connection point. Here you can see the extension of the Powell Bridge. Here's the before and after. This slide is really pretty amazing and I think explains the concept of the park. This is the way it's laid out now. This is the water's edge. This is the parking that was put in by the county. Here's the roadway and here's the swale. There's the Marine Stadium. So that's how we get 20 acres. All we need to do is really move the road into the swale area, reorganize our drainage system, and then we capture back basically everything that's paved today, and we just move it over, and that constitutes 20 acres. Here you can see in more graphic representation a photograph before and after, so I'll do that again. It becomes quite a large park, really. Here you see another example. Look at the amount of area on the island that's dedicated to paving, and look at what it could become afterwards. When we do have parking on site, which would be required, the bike path and the ped running path rises up and we bring the cars in underneath so that never is there a single situation where the bikes have to cross the road. Here you can see the loop out toward the new Bear Cut. Here you can see the overhead bridge, similar to the Gateway Bridge that's at the entry point. And here you can see the aerial that shows you how it connects to the underline underneath 95. It then has this loop that comes up along the express ramp that brings you from the quay over to US 1. So we're able to capture back this right-of-way, build it overhead. This is a ramp that brings you down to Boucle and up to the bicycle bridge, and then it gets down to grade and just travels all the way out the quay. Here is the new Bear Cut Bridge. Strava is an app that cyclists use, which is similar to Waze. If you use Waze for your car, Strava is the bicycle one. And this is where we get the data, which actually FDOT gathers, and shows that this is by far the most popular and highly traveled bicycle route for runners and cyclists in the entire state. This is really the big issue. We're realizing, I guess I'm realizing today, that the reason that these efforts that have been publicized amongst us, they're really trail efforts, because we really need someone to step in and help us understand how we can take all the different municipalities, get all of the governmental agencies, and lay out a network, and then do everything we can, like Michael says, to drop it from the sky and have it become something that just becomes available to all of us. Because I'm absolutely convinced that this city, unlike so many others in the country, I can't imagine a more ideal city for bicycling. Our weather is good, the terrain is flat. We have, I know in our practice, all that we really deal with every day are new ideas. Everybody's coming in with innovation. We have shared working, we have shared lodging, we have all kinds of mixed uses, we have a huge millennial generation. I'm convinced that if we were to build it, they would absolutely use it. Thank you very much.
So I want you guys to be thinking of your questions. I'm going to throw one out, but I'm going to turn quickly to you all, so please. And do we have, is there a mic? Okay, so I'll start with one, but then we'll quickly turn to you all. So as Bernard was talking about, we're at this remarkable moment in Miami where we've got a host of projects that are underway here. Meg with the 10-mile of the Underline. Bernard, with Rickenbacker Park. Ludlam Trail is starting master planning, a 6.2-mile trailway. So, right, think all of those in different stages of planning. Meg is already beginning to actually build a portion of the Underline, just about soon. Not to get too far ahead of ourselves. Very close. Remarkable things are underway. But Michael, I want to ask you, in looking at cities around the world, what has been you found needed to have that tipping point, right? I mean, in Copenhagen, as Jim was talking about, it wasn't always this way. A very conscious decision was made to move away from the automobile as the primary mode of transportation in the city. As cities around the world where you're working, what has been that thing that's really pushed it over? And we've made a place like Miami could actually find its way as a top 10 city on your list.
I've looked at the patterns. I've looked at all of these emerging bicycle cities, the zeros to heroes, the cities who did it a little bit before. And in a lot of cities, a lot of advocacy, a lot of activists, people pushing, upwards, and that's important. But really, all the cities that I was talking about, it's been top down. It's been simply the head of a transportation department. The guy in Buenos Aires, he was the head of transportation. He traveled in Europe. He went, why are we not doing this? He went back and said to the mayor, we got to do this, and he sold the idea. It's really top down. I mean, we know what to do and how to do it. And I can, for the price of a 10 miles of 6-lane, highway, you can Copenhagenize this entire city. It's that cheap to do it. We know what to do, but I can't design your politicians. That's up to you guys, right? But it is really, it's been top down. And the conversation really changed in North America. We were talking before how a lot of cities around the world hopped onto this early. Like about 2006, 2007, the bicycle really came back in our public consciousness as transport. It is the second, bicycle culture 2.0. And America was sort of late to the game. We saw a lot of cities around the world doing it, but now, as a country of this size and drive should, you're really playing catch up now. It's really with all of the cities that I mentioned. So it's cities that send delegations. It's really this weird thing. Night cities, 8 to 80 cities. And People for Bikes is another organization, taking cities and politicians and policymakers, flying them over, rubbing their nose in it and say, this is what we got to do. And then, you guys come back excited and empowered, hopefully, and ready to spread the message. So a lot of the cities that are just rocking it in the United States are cities that have actually, done the trip, learned, and gathered the experience, and came back and understood how it fits into your context here. That's all the cities I was mentioning before: San Francisco, Pittsburgh, Philly, Minneapolis. All of these cities have really made a serious effort to understand, not just clicking through some YouTube videos or just kind of trying to see what it's like in Copenhagen, but actually doing it. Actually, night cities is like incredibly important in that paradigm. You got to see it to believe it and to be able to do it.
And it sounds like we have to be going to our political candidates and actually be pressing on this. It sounds like that's what the differences in cities has been. Yeah. Questions right here. Do we? Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cece. I'm with the Miami Climate Alliance and 350.org South Florida. I have a two-part question that's probably especially for James and Aileen, but open to everyone. So my first part is, how are you building into this process a way for all of us to show up and say that we want this? Are there, public forums? Are there rallies? Are there ways that we can show up and advocate that can help tip the scales, that can help show that there's political will for this and bring attention to it? My second part is, how are we considering and getting data on race and class? Miami has some of the worst statistics on income inequality, the ratio of what we make versus what we pay in rent, again, one of the worst in the country. Right now, the majority of people who ride their bike are people who ride it because they have to, because they don't have cars. One of the people who died on the Rickenbacker Causeway was a Guatemalan immigrant who was riding to work. So, and also as gentrification is increasing, more working class people are actually being pushed out into the suburbs because this is now more desirable to be in the city center. So how are we considering all of these things when we're talking about these plans? Are we collecting data? Are we getting input? How are we considering those things?
Two great questions.
You can think about taking the harder portion while I take the easy portion first.
Magnanimous.
I'm going to tell you about one project, and that's Calle Ocho, 8th Street. And it's a one-way pair with 7th Street. And we're doing a project development and environmental study. That's what we do when we look at alternatives. And ultimately, from that, we pick one alternative, we do a set of plans, and we build it. But we know we just started this. It's going to take a couple of years. And it will have a public input phase. That's why we're talking about it, for your question. That's very significant. And there will be constituencies that think that Calle Ocho should not be a one-way pair. It should be two-way streets. So take 7th and 8th and make them two-way. There will be a constituency that says we need an express bus lane on 8th. There'll be a bicycle constituency. We need bike paths both ways, 5 feet plus a 2-foot buffer. There will be merchants that want parking on both sides. How about wide sidewalks for a cafe? How about some green space? We have 80 feet width. So the project is really going to be about choices. And constituencies are going to speak up for what they want. And how do you divide up that limited asset, which is the room that we have to work with, and which features do you put in and which do you not? And that's going to have a lot to do with the public input. What do people say that they want? We can't have everything. Copenhagen gave away a lot of automobile parking when they decided to do bicycles. It's a choice that needs to be made.
And how can people, for using Caiocho as an example, how can people find out the way in which they can engage in that process?
We do a lot of advertising at the public meetings, and we don't try to keep it a secret. And we're also doing more interaction online, live, so that you don't even have to leave home to participate. So we reach out and try to get more involvement. We'd love to have more involvement. A lot of times you get a special interest constituency that comes out in force, and project developers, we know that there are people out there that want something else, but they're not being heard because they're not coming out. We'd love to see a good spectrum of people that tell us what their interests are.
And very quick, I imagine you're using platforms like Twitter, Facebook, et cetera, to
Yes,
share.
we are.
So if we follow you, we could, another way to find out.
Yeah, and we have Tish right here, our public information officer, and we're trying to use the technology that people use in their daily lives and make it work for us too.
Aileen.
Sure. So I just like to add to what Jim said to your in answer to your question in terms of public involvement and engagement. Often we find that those who do show up to the public hearings and meetings on projects are those that we would say the not in my backyard movement, and we rarely do hear from those constituents that are supportive of the project and do want to see these type of features incorporated. And so we definitely encourage that, and we try to find as many innovative ways to make sure that we're doing outreach. And Jim pointed out Tish here from FDOT. We have David Henderson here, intermodal manager and bike expert, and working on the bike master plans for the county and at the state level. The Parks Department is here tonight. Carlos Cruz Casas, who was in Copenhagen with us, is sitting right next to you. Avid bike supporter, but also working in the county to pilot some of these projects. So we want to hear what you have to say, and we encourage that input. Now, the second half of your question regarding data, if you allow me to refocus that question, because I think it's valid, but I'd like to take it a step further. And it's not, the question is not so much of are we collecting data, but what are we doing with it? I happen to think that we are data rich, but what are we doing with that data? And my answer to that, I want to relate it to our experience in Copenhagen, is that everyone's collecting data, and how are you using it is different. And in Copenhagen, somehow they have a different approach to the return on investment or cost-benefit ratio when they're putting together their public projects in terms of the type of benefit per cost they're getting on these type of facilities. There's something different. There's a different component in their formula that relates to the equitable use and sharing of public space and the benefit of public interaction and economic mobility for those that are lower income, that have access to just contact in the public space with others that could create opportunities. There was a lot of discussion of that when we were in Copenhagen. So, we're looking very closely at the return on investment and cost-benefit ratio formulas that we have here and seeing how we're transferring them from a highway mode to transit mode. And this was, part of our takeaway. How are we valuing these features, and what's the ultimate benefit?
Michael, you wanted to jump in on this question, and then we'll turn over here.
No, I said it's an interesting age. The bicycles returning to our streets, to our cities, and it's great that FDOT's starting to look at the data, doing the studies. All the dots around the country are doing it. A lot of the data that came out of Denmark and the Netherlands, is oh my God, that's amazing. But I understand that you have to do your own in the context here. But really, the benefits of bicycle infrastructure. If you look at Plan Z, bicycle infrastructure increases property value. This is like in America and in Europe, we just know you put something like that in, you put it on street here, property values rise, life comes back to the streets. New York, they were like going, yeah, we heard it's going to be good for us, but 8th Avenue, they were complaining. Retail's complaining about it. They're going to kill us. You know, retail's up 47% on all the main streets in New York where they put in best practice infrastructure. It's you know, the benefits are amazing. But I would say just for advocates, like, you should already know more than they do, right? that's what's really happened in a lot of countries around the world. A lot of cities where there's advocates, you know, is that, you know, they really have, you know, strip mine the internet and found out all these different things. That's really strong advocacy, is when you're ahead of the curve about all of these different studies and all of the different environmental impacts and all of the things, right? Just sort of
Let's
advocacy
go to a
pro tip.
question right here.
So, Mikael or Michael? What is your... Michael? Okay. Mikael, no? Whatever. Yeah, first I just wanted to give you my personal background. I grew up riding bicycle all the time in New York City, and the last 23 years I spent between Miami Beach and Europe, and have bicycles in both and use them as my main means of transportation, including getting here tonight by bicycle from the beach. A big difference between the two places is that when you're bicycle riding here, though your English is impeccable, is you learn in yourself all types of four-letter words that you didn't even know exist riding around here, especially the way that I do. It would take me too long to go into it in this kind of format, but one observation that I can immediately make is that if the idea of Copenhagenizing Miami Beach does not take into account the local intricacies of the laws, specifically, for example, that you're allowed to make a right turn on a red light, and the mishmash of cultures and where people have learned and got their driver's license, it's going to get lost in translation.
Great.
It's not to say that, and I really, really hope that what you want to do succeeds.
So let's go to, so the question is, sort of, Copenhagenize can't be one size fits all, right? Is that essentially?
It's not my question exactly, but it's...
Well,
it's, yeah, I mean...
Frame a
it's
question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could try to make it as brief as possible. I mean, I can go on for way, way too long, and I won't.
Super, yeah.
But the point that I'm making is...
What's the question?
Let me just get there, okay? The point
Quick.
that I... All right, let it go. Thank you.
Someone behind the column has been waiting. Yeah, I don't know if you can
Well,
see
do you
it.
want to try and answer that?
Answer what? No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, I don't like...
Different local regulations and laws and cultural differences in communities.
I mean, you know, it's infrastructure. You know, we know that, like, there's I often say there's no bicycle culture. This is one of the things I often say. In Copenhagen, we don't have bicycle culture, okay? We have vacuum cleaner culture, all right? We all have a vacuum. We all learn how to use it. We all use it, right? We don't dress up to go vacuuming. We don't wave at other vacuum cleaning enthusiasts on the streets. It's just a tool to make our daily lives easier. We know how to design the infrastructure. You know, if the drivers, you know, there's actually a study that shows, like, you know, asking people, you know, how crazy are the drivers in your city? Like, it's unanimous around the world. We have the world's stupidest drivers. Like, every city in the world will tell you that they have the world's stupidest drivers, right? I mean, we know how to design ourselves out of it. Salt Lake City they have protected bicycle infrastructure in their intersections. They create concrete buffers to really separate. I mean, there's a way to do this. Everything's been invented, man. And, you know, I don't buy the whole, you know, we're a little bit different in Miami in that sense. I know they're nicer. You were telling me, like, you go up to Vermont and they just sort of stop politely, let you cross the street, like you were saying they do in Copenhagen. You get that in Fargo, North Dakota. Maybe it's a little more crazy here. We can design ourselves out of that, man. We have the tools and we know what to do. And I think it's possible.
Jim, who, right here.
Hi, good evening. My name is Melissa. So I have, it's a multi-part question. I think the Rickenbacker project seems like a good step in the right direction. However, I was a little late to coming here, so maybe this was already discussed. However, my concern is for people trying to get into the urban center that may not live in the urban center. How are we able to connect those people to their jobs in the downtown area, especially to Miami Beach? I haven't really seen much of a discussion about that at all. You also talk about changing the culture here as far as transportation. This is obviously a very motorist-friendly city, and no offense to you guys, because I'm pretty sure there is inner conflicts within the FDOT, but you guys have also helped facilitate that as well. And even, I live in the suburbs, and even in the suburbs, we have plenty of space to maybe create bike lanes. But FDOT has basically said, we don't want trees, we don't want anything that might be obstructing because it could be distracting for drivers and they're gonna crash. But surprise, people are still crashing, not because of trees, but because they're drinking or doing something or whatever reason. So there seems to be a little bit of disconnect within FDOT, and you guys have declined certain projects. I think there was something going on Alton Road some while back that also encompassed making better bike lanes, and you guys flat out denied it. So can we also take a little bit of accountability for that as well? So we can't even get people to use their turning signals.
So
How do you
let's-
propose to implement that culture of just respecting people and the right to live? Because even though we have big flashing signs to show that pedestrians need to cross, people are still running through them. I mean, last time I was in San Francisco, I was shocked to see that people actually stop for people in the turning lane. Like, no, I've gotten almost hit so many times when I've had the right of way to make turns, and guys cussing me off, saying like, well, you should be watching out where you're going, and I'm like, well, I have the right of way to make this turn, and they're like, fuck you. So can we talk about this?
Can I take a crack at it? I'm not FDOT, but I want to hone in on the first portion of your question, which is what are we doing to get into the urban core to facilitate this type of transport, the bicyclists, to the urban core that does not live in the urban core, and we really want to relate that to the first and last mile connection. So we want to make sure that you can use your bicycle in public transportation, and that you have a safe and efficient way to make that connection to the first mile, to the closest mass transit station. I don't know if you were here when you heard earlier, the Strategic Miami Area Rapid Transit, as we call it, the SMART Plan, is a mass transit expansion program that's currently Priority 1 funded for environmental stage here in Miami-Dade County. And a core principle of that is the first and last mile connection. Because if you can't get to your last mile destination, you're not going to use transit and you're not going to have those options. So I just wanted to relate to that first part of your question. And I know that you had some follow-up with FDOT. I don't think I'll let Jim answer some. I took the easy one this time, Jim. So, I mean, I work with all the agencies, with FDOT, with the county. I hear what you're saying regarding, making certain requests and then getting back responses for engineering reasons, for safety reasons, and I think that's just part of the critical conversation and continuing dialogue that we need to be having, like we're having tonight, where we're starting to say, what are the priorities? What is the rank, the order, the hierarchy, the order, putting people first, bicyclists, vehicles, and how we're going to make that work?
Why don't we take...
You're also advocating that we need to be more present at these meetings and talk to our elected officials, but we have elected officials who won't even meet with their constituents outside of their office. So we have a lot. Miami is notorious for making a lot of decisions that are not.
So can I make one thought? I mean, we've got a City of Miami mayoral election this year and a City of Miami Beach mayoral election this year. So issues like this would seem to be things that could be raised in a big way in both of those elections. One thought. I know that's not all of Miami-Dade County by any stretch, but it's one thought. But you wanted to get into the right, to just pick one issue. You were interested in this whole issue of right turns. Do you want to pick one just to get an answer from them on a particular one?
Kind of took my last slide in about 2 seconds. Like the sixth bullet on my last slide said, no right turn on red. That's what I observed, and it makes a big difference. When you got lots of bicycle traffic and lots of pedestrians, you shouldn't have right turn on red. So I recognize that. We have plenty of places where right turn on red makes a lot of sense, and other places where it should be banned. As far as public participation, you may be skeptical, or maybe you'll believe me, but I'll tell you that FDOT gets more resistance to putting in bike lanes than we get support. And we find ourselves being an advocate and having pressure against us to put them in. They're not suitable in every place, they're not reasonable in every place, but we'd like to put them in more than we do. But just like my Calle Ocho story, it's often a choice and a trade-off, and we do not have enough activism to make the choice bicycles.
Well,
That generated some hands.
that got some hands. So you're picking who's next? Why don't we go right here, the front row?
Hi, my name's Adam. So one of the first slides that Michael showed was the straight lines for people, bicycles, buses, they're a little wiggly, and then cars are very difficult to do. And I've noticed that FDOT likes to make choices, like on Calle Ocho, where you might turn it from a one-way couplet to a two ways. You will never make the cars not go in a straight line. FDOT won't, the county won't, the MPO will never design a project where the cars are not the primary fastest level of service is the primary thing. So if the way that we get to Copenhagenize Miami is to make it difficult to drive a car compared with riding a bike or walking, how is FDOT, the MPO, the county, and the cities, how are they going to do that?
Well, our mission is to provide mobility. That doesn't mean artificially slowing traffic down so that they'll be driven away to find another mode. We want to encourage the other modes. Right now, 95% of people that commute in this county do so in a passenger vehicle, most of them single passenger. That's 5% for walking, bicycling, and transit. And that's pathetic, that's ridiculous. I heard you say, why not 20% bicycles? I think that'd be great, and I also think it's fairly reasonable. We need to take that 5%, make it 10%, make it 15%, make it 20%. But we still have mobility is based on passenger cars here. And even under a great degree of success, it's going to be that way for a long time. And it's going to be very important to economic vitality, getting to work, getting to jobs. We can't give up on the cars until we have a replacement.
But we haven't even made an effort to start trying to think about giving up on the cars, right? Like the FDOT project, the Calle Ocho project, you're not going to decrease the level of service. Like it's just not even on the table.
No, that's incorrect. It is on the table. There are 3 lanes in each direction on 8th and 7th. That's 6 lanes of traffic. There will be options developed that are 4 lanes of traffic.
Why don't we go right back to
Hi. Two things we haven't spoken about, cost and schedule. Maybe Michael could talk about cost of these 10 cities that you've seen. Is it generally being public finance, the module for financing this project? Have there been public and private partnerships that have allowed these things to happen in a faster way? Schedule-wise, I don't know if you can talk about some roadblocks that are in place that still have to be won over so that this thing can happen the fastest way possible.
I have no one answer to that because it's a lot of different cities, a lot of in different states, different countries that I've been mentioning. In Northern Europe, it's municipal. They take care of that. They get some money from a national government, but generally it's municipal. I know you guys work differently over here, and there's many different constellations. Long Beach in California, our project there, I know that they have money, so it's coming out of the municipal coffers. Detroit is completely broke, and still, last year was the first year where they broke even actually. But so we know that they're getting a lot of funding, federal funding to try and kickstart Detroit. They're just trying to kickstart it in a new, modern way now. So it's a tough question, but I mean, there's many different ways, and I wouldn't be able to speak to exactly how it would work here. Public-private partnerships are certainly a part of the equation in some of the cities. I just can't quote anything incredibly intelligent about it, but it's different ways in different states. But there's always a way, I would say.
We use public-private partnerships here. The Port of Miami Tunnel was a public-private partnership. It was built by the contractor and is being paid over about 30 years. The Signature Bridge, 395, we're letting it this year. We're paying for it over the next 5 years. The private sector will fund it and get paid later. That's a public-private partnership. In all of these, however, ultimately, this is a secret, the private sector gets their money back. They have to either be paid by government, it may be on a deferred basis, but they get paid and they get a profit on it, or they get a revenue stream that can come from the project. They get a benefit. So there's no free money. There has to be an asset, and the private sector can front the money, but they'll get it back.
The idea was to expedite the project, not to get free money. Right.
And it's been successfully employed. We have legislation that allows us to do that.
Go right up front here.
Hi. As I listen about the dilemma that you must face in this Calle Ocho conversation that you're having with the community, it just seems that it's such an open conversation. There's so many different choices. And I think about you being there in front of everyone, and back at, we study like Barcelona, for instance. It's a city that has made a commitment that 50% of the right-of-way is utilized for vehicular movement or for vehicles, and 50% of the right-of-way is used for moving other ways. So if the conversation could be more precise and on 8th Street and say, you know, we have a commitment to dedicate 50% of both roads to either vehicles or these other systems that we might have, I wonder if that might be a better, I mean, if the conversation would be more productive, because then it's now so open-ended. And then people can say, well, if I have to walk 50% for walking or biking, then maybe we can do less for biking or more for walking, for cafes. And then in the vehicle conversation, do you want public transit? Do you want single drivers? Do you want parking? And I think that way, I mean, I think sometimes when it's so open, it's very difficult to really decide what you want. And I thought that was a very interesting idea. And as we look at all of the sort of urban environment and the fact that you are now helping us to consider these conversations and you're opening them up in the way you are, I wonder if we can begin to consider that a commitment in these sort of more urban, tighter areas that could be in this sort of 50-50 way.
One of the things we heard in Copenhagen, and I doubt if it's an accurate figure, it's just an idea, or maybe some calculated, it's that 80% of the space between buildings in an urban area is transportation right away. That sound right to you? So when you think about your public spaces and what you have to work with, and what is particularly in public ownership, if you're going to transform your urban area, it is within those public rights of way. So it'd be difficult to go and set an arbitrary 50-50, but maybe some of you noticed the Biscayne Green experiment on Biscayne Boulevard. Did you notice that? It was out there for, I think it was 21 days, right? And you put some money into it, the Knight Foundation. And it was an experiment. Can we take this parking away and create public space? Can we take a lane away from the traffic? Is this something that we want to do permanently? And part of that was to develop public support for this idea of making choices about the usage of that public space. And that choice may be less lanes, less parking, but that's a painful decision that needs to be made individually, case by case. But test projects like Biscayne Green was a good way to get there.
I'm going to add to that exactly what Jim said, and I had on my PowerPoint earlier, which we saw from Copenhagen, and we learned the the concept of pilot projects or an interim condition that you introduce into your public infrastructure is critical, and I believe that that will help advance the conversation more, because I hear a theme in a lot of the comments as to how are we going to do that, and from where I'm sitting, I can tell you that declaring war on the car is not going to advance that conversation in any way compared to piloting these concepts. And once people try them out, once people experience it, once people start to support it, then you start advancing these conversations. And so I think we're not Copenhagen, and we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We have an infrastructure, we have our urban design, we have our structure. How are we going to share the road? How are we going to share our infrastructures? How are we going to make it safe? Mobility for all the users of the road. Declaring war on the car is really not going to get us, there any faster. But introducing the concepts that are safe, that people want to use, want to see happen more often. When the pilot is done, they want to see it come back, try it in other areas. This is how we start advancing the conversation.
We go right here, and we're at 8:07, so we're already sort of past where we. But can we go to 8:15 thereabouts?
You're asking me?
Well, so we'll just try to get some quick questions and get them all. Please.
Hi, so my name is Daniela and I lived here for a long time, but I learned to ride a bicycle really in the Netherlands. So I have a couple of observations on this presentation because there was a talk a lot about accessibility and this idea of sharing the road. But, as others have pointed out, this idea that FDOT and the plans which are being created, not just by FDOT, but MDOT and anybody else, the plans that are being implemented right now have nothing about sharing the road, or really few examples that are available. And that's a disappointment because once things are being built, the Flagler Street, for example, that project is failing, so might as well just add something that will at least excite people. But sorry, I'm not done yet. With Copenhagenize, you were speaking about design and this idea of we have the plans and we have the ideas, you just have to implement them. But there's also something about rules. So in the Netherlands, the cars are really at fault if something happens. So people respect the rules because otherwise you're gonna be, you're gonna suffer yourself. So you put the bicycle first, and really cyclists do not obey the rules. I can tell you all about that if you want to sit down. And this idea of top-down really is the way to go, because we can have all the advocacy you want, but if it's not being publicized, maybe we don't show up. But really, there needs to be a plan which needs to be implemented whether people like it or not. And it's about the future, thinking forward. And then my last question? Yes, my really good question is, there's the MIA Intermodal Center, which was created, which has the tri-rail, and has the metro rail and has a lot of buses, but it has no connection to bicycles. And I was wondering how that will be implemented because all the streets around it are very high traffic oriented and high speeds.
So I'd like to assure you that we are looking at bicycle facilities. In fact, I believe there's actually a Florida statute that mandates that FDOT, Florida Department of Transportation, it looks at incorporating bike lanes, bike facilities on every state road project that they're doing. We are doing that. I just want to assure you, I understand that it may be frustrating, it may appear that we're not moving as quickly as you would want, but just the fact that, all the different initiatives and master plan and projects that we mentioned here that are moving forward shows the level of commitment and interest in doing this. So I just want to assure you and encourage you to continue giving us your input every time a project is being reconstructed, renovated in your area. What do you want to see? What are the features that you want there? How are we doing bicycles at the Intermodal Center? Well, again, we are focusing on our first and last mile. I know Carlos took the microphone. I don't know if you wanted to add to that. Did you?
Do you want to speak to that, Carlos?
Well, yeah, I wanted to. Well, good evening. My name is Carlos Krug. I'm Assistant Director of the Department of Transportation and Public Works. I wanted to leave also in a positive note.
Well, just before we'll come back to you, but in terms of the question about the bicycling, the Miami Intermodal, is that
so at that particular location, we're looking. There's development going on the sites, and we're going to be looking at how we can do to improve access to that location. But at this point, it's looking. We talk about the Miami Loop, it's interconnected to the Lutlam and how we use the facilities around. But particularly right now, we don't have a project, but it's one of the things that we're looking for the smart plan and the extension of the corridor at all the stations, looking at the first and last mile, access to those for bicycle facilities.
And for the agencies, you have the commitment. If you go on Metrorail or Tri-Rail now, you'll see that you can bring your bicycle on there. There are areas, seats that were taken out and areas created for you to go with your bicycle that were not there years ago. So you can see the effort and the movement and incrementally the facilities that are being put in place to promote these type of connections.
Yeah, I'd like to weigh in here just a moment. I think that sometimes in the desire to answer a question, what you realize is we're asking the wrong question. I don't think that this is a war on cars. I don't think that advocacy is necessarily a single-purpose concept. I think that one of the things that I think we can learn from Copenhagen is what we should really be talking about is how do we move people. The question of whether it's on a car or in a bike or in transit is really a secondary question. The question is how do we move people? Now, personally, I have a car, I have a bike, I ride transit, I walk. I used to run till my knees gave out, but I look for every possible mode because I'm actually an advocate for all of them. And I think a lot of people in this room, when we're driving, we're frustrated. When we're riding the bike, we're frustrated. If we're walking, we're frustrated. I think that we're asking the wrong question. I think that we need to kind of calm down as a community and begin to say to ourselves, what would actually be the best way that we can move the most people in the most comfortable way possible? Where does our investment support that concept? And what amount of investment from a democratized point of view would generate the facility that would be able to make that happen? Because we're always in public meetings. I know that's my work. I do public urban design work. We all are in this stuff. All the governmental people know. And we're kind of beaten up because advocates are never happy because everyone's point of view is always the most important one to them. But I think that the benefit of this evening, and I think the Copenhagenizing of Miami, for me, is the democratization issue. If we have 500,000 people in this community, we're facing the end of driving cars and having driverless cars. We're now having conversations about no longer investing in parking garages. We're looking at ways that we can retrofit our entire way of thinking. It seems to me that we should not be acting like an aircraft carrier trying to turn, but we should really be, top-down to me is not necessarily only political. Top-down is also agency and departmental. And I think that we should be doing, as a community, more exercises like Rickenbacker, where we say, here's an answer. Let's discuss this answer, because I know when I run public meetings, if I have everybody giving me their opinion, there's really no end to the evening, and there's no way that it's ever going to be resolved, because people in the group cannot agree on one thing. So I think that we're asking the wrong question. And we should be asking the other question, which is how do we move the people? How quickly can we move them? What's the best way to spend the money? And how can we all act together in concert? Because we all are advocates of all positions in this particular conversation. And I think that's how we should begin to act. And I'm so happy that we have you as FDOT director. I've heard so many good things about you. And Aileen, you as well. I think we're at a moment where enough is changing that we can throw all the balls in the air. And we can just simply decide, this is the best way to do it. Let's decide something, because when we decide something, we're going to have an answer that's going to produce something. And as long as we keep questioning all of the possibilities, we're going to end up with nothing.
So we'll go very quickly.
With Carlos,
one here, then 2, 3 over to
And done.
boom, and then we're done.
So Bernard, you
then,
really
then whoever didn't get to ask a question can quickly run up to everyone that's here.
Bernard, you really stole my thunder. I really wanted to really live on a good note. You know, we are in a great time here in Miami. Of the 3 agencies that we have, the Department of Transportation and Public Works, FDOT, and the MPO, all 3 has new executive directors, right? A new secretary, a new executive director, a new director of Transportation and Public Works, Vizali Bravo, all within not just 1 year. 1 year. That is amazing. It's a great opportunity for us to really start changing and really start trying. We see that with all the projects. Biscayne Green was one of a kind. We do have one complete street, a protected bike lane and bus lane coming here to downtown within the next couple months. So it's a great time for us. We have changed in direction, and it's time for us to come in, voice our opinions, and really test those solutions.
Let's go right down. Where did I see that? I promised to go. Yeah, right there.
Hey. First part comment, second part question, 45 seconds.
Awesome.
Okay. First of all, I'm sorry that you guys are the punching bag for this because as you can tell from a lot of young people in the audience, there's a lot of anger. And unfortunately, it's directed towards you, but you two are the best shot that we have. Given that you went to Copenhagen and given that you're here and present listening to us, so thank you, and thank you for the Knight Foundation for organizing this. And as you can tell, like as young people, we don't really see this being as something that takes years, especially coming from cities like New York and other cities that have implemented it very quickly. We all have a choice in where we can live, and if Miami doesn't reach that pace, we leave. Second part, which is a question, which is more a question for the audience. How many people feel like here you want to get involved in transportation advocacy and you don't feel like you have an appropriate channel to do so? Are there a lot of people here, or I'm just curious? Like 5 or 6? Who those people are, can we please chat at the end of this so we can like unify and focus our efforts towards something that's more cohesive and so that we aren't just constantly battering these people at every meeting and, you know, come together on something. So I'm sorry, it's a question for the audience, not for the panel, but thank you.
Awesome. Great question. Great question. Meg, wait for the microphone.
Hi, I'm Meg. And
hold on, Meg. We got a microphone.
I'm Meg, and how many hours have you volunteered towards the Rickenbacker project?
I don't want to talk about it.
So I'll tell you why that's important, because we're talking about lack of advocacy in our community, and I think, Bernard, you're one of those people who's really stepped up. I think that there is a stage up here with people who are giving, you know, their evenings. This evening is free for everybody to come out and talk about a future vision for our city. We have a Parks Department in the front row that's looking at greenways and blueways, and I agree with you, Carlos. We're at a great time in our community, and there's a lot of ways to get involved. And you, if you want to advocate, believe me, there's a lot of ways to do it because we all need help. But we need to thank everybody here for this evening, and also for Bernard for your persistence in what you're doing. And I really applaud your effort. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, most of all, want to say thank you to all of you for being here. I think we could go all night. The energy and passion is simply awesome. But just to underline a point that's made several times, it really appears we have an opportunity here, right? The leaders of transportation here in Miami and South Florida are asking us to engage with them and advocate for what we want. So let's do it. So thank you very much, Bernard. Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you.